There's something happening in every relationship that most men sense but can't quite identify. You feel controlled but can't prove it. You sense manipulation but can't name it. You know something's off but can't pinpoint exactly what. Women have developed 6 psychological tactics that operate below the level of conscious awareness. These aren't calculated schemes by evil masterminds. They're biological programs running automatically, inherited from millions of years of evolutionary programming. The woman using these tactics often doesn't even realize she's deploying them. But here's the reality that changes everything. These tactics only work on men who are psychologically vulnerable to them. Understanding how they operate is the first step to becoming immune. The first tactic is withdrawal and emotional distance. She becomes quiet, distant, and emotionally unavailable without explanation. One day everything's normal. The next day she's keeping to herself, giving short answers, seeming preoccupied. Your brain immediately goes into panic mode, wondering what you did wrong. You start reviewing recent conversations, trying to identify what changed. Did you forget something important? Miss an anniversary? Say something offensive? The confusion drives you to pursue her harder, apologize for things you didn't do, and modify your behavior to address problems you can't identify. This withdrawal isn't personal punishment, it's unconscious testing. Her biology is measuring your desperation levels and evaluating how much control she has over your emotional state. The more you chase during her withdrawal, the more you prove that your psychological stability depends on her attention and approval. Women do this to keep you on your toes, ensuring you don't get too comfortable or start taking her for granted. It's a psychological scare tactic designed to have you constantly thinking about her and panicking that you might be losing her. The withdrawal creates artificial scarcity that makes her attention feel more valuable when she eventually provides it again. The second tactic is mirroring and false compatibility. During the early relationship phase, she unconsciously adapts her personality, interests and values to match what she perceives you want in a partner. She evaluates what you need emotionally and presents herself as the perfect match for those needs. She loves your music, shares your hobbies, agrees with your values, and seems to want the same things from life. You think you found your soulmate, someone who understands you completely and shares your vision for the future. The compatibility feels too perfect to be coincidence. But this mirroring serves a specific biological function, securing attachment during the vulnerable bonding period. Once she's confident in your commitment, her authentic personality begins emerging. Suddenly she's not as interested in your hobbies, doesn't share your enthusiasm for activities you once enjoyed together, and reveals different priorities and preferences. The problem isn't that she was lying. She was unconsciously adapting to maximize her appeal during the crucial commitment phase. Her biology programmed her to become whatever would secure your attachment, then allowed her real self to surface once that attachment was established. The third tactic is guilt deployment and responsibility transfer. She makes you responsible for her emotional state by expressing hurt, disappointment, or sadness in ways that imply your actions caused her distress. A woman knows there's heavy social pressure on men to ensure their woman is happy and well taken care of, and she unconsciously exploits this programming. When she's upset, you automatically assume you did something wrong and start working to fix the situation. She doesn't have to directly ask for changes in your behavior. Your natural protective instincts drive you to identify and eliminate whatever caused her emotional pain. This tactic is particularly effective because it uses your own values against you. Your desire to be a good partner becomes the mechanism through which she shapes your behavior. Each time you modify your actions to prevent her distress, you're being trained through guilt-based conditioning. The most insidious aspect is how this creates self-doubt about your own perceptions. You might notice signs that something's wrong in the relationship, but when you bring up concerns, she throws a tantrum, turns on the waterworks, or blames you for being insecure and controlling. You end up apologizing and questioning your own judgment, even when your instincts were correct. The fourth tactic is hot and cold emotional cycles. She alternates between periods of intense affection and attention, followed by periods of distance and coldness. This creates intermittent reinforcement that makes her positive attention psychologically addictive. When she's hot, she showers you with affection and attention, making you feel comfortable and attached. You feel valued, desired, and secure in the relationship. Then she suddenly becomes cold. Conversations become dry, her demeanor gives off distant vibes, and she responds with short answers like, I'm fine. Okay, nothing. Yeah, I'm busy. Talk to you later. You don't realize it, but she's getting you hooked. Now you're sitting there like an addict, messaging and asking what's wrong, wanting to see her, buying gifts to try to fix whatever you think is happening. You're desperate to get her attention and affection back to the previous level. This emotional rollercoaster keeps you constantly focused on the relationship and continuously working to maintain her positive regard. The unpredictability of her affection creates psychological addiction because you never know when the next dose of validation will come. The fifth tactic is suggestion and indirect influence. Rather than making direct requests that might trigger resistance, she plants ideas in your mind through casual comments and stories. She conveniently mentions things she's seen and liked, tells stories about romantic gestures other men have made, or comments on things she's never experienced. I saw this dress online that I loved, she might say. Or, Sarah's boyfriend surprised her with flowers yesterday, so sweet. Or, I've never had a man buy me anything like that. She's not directly telling you to do anything, but she's subconsciously putting actions into your head and influencing you to want to do these things for her. This indirect approach exploits the difference between how men and women typically communicate. Men usually say what they mean directly, while women often communicate through implication and suggestion. When she influences you through suggestion, it feels like you're choosing to do things that make her happy, rather than being told what to do. The sixth tactic is love bombing and emotional overwhelm. During the early relationship phase, she provides intense levels of affection, attention, and validation that create powerful psychological bonds. This isn't conscious manipulation. Her brain is genuinely flooded with chemicals that make her feel intense connection, which she expresses through overwhelming positive attention. The love bombing progression typically follows a predictable pattern. Day 1, you're so handsome. Day 2, oh my god, we have so much in common. Day 3, I don't usually fall for someone this fast. Day 4, I just feel like we're meant to be together. Day 5, I love you. By the end of this process, you're falling hard, and she's got you exactly where her biology wanted you. Fully invested and extremely vulnerable. But love bombing serves a strategic biological function, creating emotional dependency that makes it difficult for you to leave even when relationship dynamics become problematic later. The memory of intense early connection becomes the standard against which all future interactions are measured. When the love bombing phase naturally ends and normal relationship dynamics resume, you interpret the reduction in intensity as evidence that something's wrong. This creates desperation to return to the early dynamic, giving her enormous power over your emotional state. Beyond these 6 primary tactics, there are additional manipulation patterns that operate through similar unconscious mechanisms. The sneaky guilt trip occurs when she agrees to something you suggest, then later expresses disappointment that it wasn't what she really wanted, even though she never told you her preference. She makes you feel guilty for not reading her mind while positioning herself as the accommodating partner. Insulting or mean-spirited sarcasm disguised as humour serves to undermine your confidence while maintaining plausible deniability. If you express vulnerability about something you're self-conscious about, she might respond with a cutting comment disguised as a joke. If you react negatively, she can claim you can't take a joke, but the psychological damage is already done. The silent treatment involves withdrawing communication and affection without explanation when she doesn't get what she wants. She doesn't express that she needs time to herself. She just stops responding to texts, avoids physical proximity, and brushes off your attempts to understand what's wrong. This passive-aggressive approach punishes you for decisions or circumstances that disappointed her. Withholding intimacy and affection operates similarly to the silent treatment, but focuses specifically on physical and emotional connection. She becomes too tired, has headaches, or is just not in the mood, but only after something didn't go her way. The timing reveals that the withdrawal is punishment rather than genuine disinterest. The "it's your fault" tactic makes you responsible for her emotions, particularly negative ones. If she's sad, it's your fault. If she's angry, it's your fault. If something completely unrelated to you affects her mood, it's still your fault because you didn't do the right thing to help her feel better. This transfers responsibility for her emotional regulation onto you, while absolving her of accountability for her own reactions. The never wrong pattern involves refusing to admit mistakes or apologize for anything. No matter what the disagreement is about, politics, your friends, how to load the dishwasher, she's always right and you're always wrong, according to her perspective. This could stem from deep insecurity where admitting error feels threatening, or it could be a manipulation tactic to maintain dominance through always being the authority on what's correct. Modern technology has amplified all these manipulation tactics exponentially. Social media provides platforms for strategic posts that create jealousy or demonstrate value. Dating apps give access to unlimited male attention that can be weaponized for withdrawal tactics. Text messaging enables sophisticated hot and cold cycles through response timing and tone variations. She can now deploy withdrawal through seen messages without responses. She can create suggestion through carefully curated social media content. She can trigger jealousy through strategic interactions with other men online. The same biological programming that operated through face-to-face interaction now operates through digital channels with increased frequency and sophistication. The key insight that transforms everything is understanding that these tactics aren't evidence of conscious cruelty or calculated manipulation. They're unconscious biological programs designed to evaluate male psychological strength and secure optimal relationship outcomes from a female evolutionary perspective. Women don't choose to deploy these tactics any more than men choose to find young, fertile women attractive. These are biological imperatives operating below the level of conscious awareness, serving functions that helped women survive and reproduce successfully over millions of years of human evolution. This biological foundation explains why reasoning with these behaviors or trying to eliminate them through discussion rarely works. You're not dealing with conscious choices that can be changed through better communication. You're dealing with unconscious programming that responds to environmental triggers rather than logical arguments. The solution isn't changing her behavior, it's developing immunity to these tactics regardless of how they're deployed. This requires building psychological strength that makes external emotional pressure irrelevant to your decision-making process. When withdrawal doesn't make you chase, she stops using withdrawal to control you. When guilt trips don't generate the responses she's seeking unconsciously, she stops deploying guilt as a relationship management tool. When hot and cold cycles don't create the psychological addiction her biology expects, she stops using emotional inconsistency to maintain your investment. Building this immunity requires developing purposes so compelling that relationship drama seems trivial by comparison. You must become so comfortable with solitude that companionship becomes optional rather than necessary. You must build such robust self-esteem that others' approval becomes nice to have rather than essential to maintain. The biological reality is that these manipulation tactics function as comprehensive testing systems designed to identify and exploit psychological weaknesses in men. They evaluate your emotional stability, boundary strength, independence level, and susceptibility to external control. The man who succumbs to these tactics proves he lacks the psychological strength necessary for leadership and protection. The man who remains unaffected proves he possesses the mental fortitude that female biology recognizes as attractive and trustworthy. From this perspective, unconscious manipulation isn't an attack on your well-being, it's an evaluation of your character. She's not trying to hurt you, she's trying to determine whether you're strong enough to handle the psychological challenges that come with long-term relationship responsibility. The cruel irony is that men who are most vulnerable to manipulation tactics are often those who care most about their relationships. Their genuine desire to make their partners happy becomes the weakness that manipulation tactics exploit most effectively. But caring about someone's happiness shouldn't require sacrificing your psychological well-being. Love shouldn't demand surrender of independent judgment. Commitment shouldn't mean accepting treatment that undermines your self-respect. When you recognize these manipulation patterns, you face a choice in how to respond. The wrong approach is trying to make her conscious of what she's doing, hoping that awareness will eliminate the behaviors. Consciousness doesn't override biology, it just makes the programming more sophisticated. The right approach is developing such strong internal validation that external emotional pressure becomes powerless to influence your decisions. You must become immune to manipulation tactics while remaining capable of genuine love and connection. This transformation requires killing the part of yourself that seeks validation from others. You must develop psychological sovereignty that allows you to engage with women from a position of strength rather than neediness. The woman who realizes her unconscious manipulation tactics don't work on you faces a psychological crisis. Her biology has been using these strategies successfully throughout her life, and suddenly they're ineffective. This forces her to develop conscious relationship skills rather than relying on unconscious programming. Some women respond by escalating their manipulation tactics, becoming more dramatic and obvious in their control attempts. These women reveal themselves as poor relationship candidates who prioritize power over partnership. Other women respond by developing authentic communication skills and genuine appreciation for your strength. These women recognize that your immunity to manipulation makes you more valuable as a long-term partner, not less. The difference between these responses reveals the woman's true character and relationship potential. The woman who escalates manipulation when subtle tactics fail is someone whose primary interest is control rather than connection. The woman who respects your boundaries and adapts to healthier dynamics is someone worth building a relationship with. The testing aspect of these manipulation tactics reveals sophisticated evaluation systems that women use to assess male psychology. Every tactic serves dual functions: immediate goal achievement and information gathering about your character and boundaries. When she withdraws emotionally, she's not just creating distance. She's testing whether you'll maintain emotional stability or become dependent on her attention for psychological well-being. When she deploys guilt tactics, she's evaluating whether you'll accept responsibility for her emotional state or maintain appropriate boundaries. These tests operate continuously throughout relationships, providing ongoing assessments of male psychological strength and relationship potential. The data gathered helps determine everything from respect levels to long-term commitment decisions. Understanding this testing framework transforms how you respond to manipulation tactics. Instead of taking them personally or trying to reason with them, you recognize them as unconscious evaluation systems that require strategic rather than emotional responses. The biological logic behind this testing is ruthlessly practical. Women need men who can provide leadership, protection, and stability under pressure. A man who crumbles under psychological manipulation certainly can't be trusted to handle real-world threats that require genuine strength. The transformation required to become immune to unconscious manipulation is profound but achievable. You must develop such compelling purposes that relationship approval becomes secondary to mission accomplishment. You must become so internally complete that external validation becomes irrelevant to your sense of worth. This psychological independence doesn't make you cold or uncaring. It makes you immune to unconscious control while remaining capable of authentic connection. You can love without being manipulated, care without being controlled, and engage without losing yourself in the process. The development of this immunity follows a predictable progression that requires consistent practice and conscious awareness. First, you must learn to recognize the patterns as they're happening, rather than only identifying them in retrospect. This means developing sensitivity to the subtle shifts in behavior that signal the beginning of manipulation tactics. When you feel sudden confusion about her emotional state, when you find yourself apologizing for things you can't identify, when you notice yourself changing plans to accommodate unexpressed displeasure, these are warning signs that unconscious programming has been activated. The second stage involves emotional detachment from outcomes. You must develop the psychological strength to remain stable when she withdraws, unaffected when she deploys guilt, and unresponsive when she creates hot and cold cycles. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally unavailable. It means your emotional state becomes independent of her manipulation tactics. The third stage requires developing alternative sources of validation and meaning that make her approval optional rather than essential. When your sense of worth comes from internal sources, your mission, your values, your personal development, external manipulation loses its power to destabilize you. The fourth stage involves maintaining boundaries consistently, regardless of the emotional pressure applied. Every time you hold your ground when manipulation tactics are deployed, you're training her unconscious programming that these strategies don't work on you. Every time you cave to pressure, you're reinforcing that the tactics remain effective. The biological programming driving these manipulation tactics includes sophisticated contingency plans for different types of male psychology. Some men respond to subtle cues, others require more obvious provocations, and still others need dramatic escalation before they react. Her unconscious testing behavior is essentially a diagnostic process designed to determine which category you belong to. Understanding this diagnostic function helps explain why some women seem to create relationship drama from nowhere. They're not necessarily trying to sabotage the relationship. They're trying to understand how your psychological system operates under stress. The drama serves as a stress test that reveals your emotional triggers, insecurity patterns, and control mechanisms. The most sophisticated women conduct these tests early in relationships to establish baseline measurements of your psychological profile. They need to know whether you're easily manipulated, how much pressure you can handle before reacting, what types of threats activate your competitive instincts, and how you respond to various forms of emotional leverage. This information becomes crucial for long-term relationship management because it allows her unconscious programming to predict and influence your responses during future conflicts or negotiations. The woman who understands your psychological triggers can activate them strategically whenever her biology determines that specific outcomes need to be achieved. The workplace provides an illuminating parallel for understanding these dynamics. Imagine an employee who questioned every decision, challenged every policy, and threatened to quit whenever asked to do something disagreeable. That employee would be terminated immediately because their behavior undermines organizational effectiveness. Yet in relationships, men often tolerate this exact behavior from women because they've been programmed to believe that love means accepting disrespect and that boundaries are selfish. They allow their authority to be undermined daily while wondering why their relationships become increasingly difficult and unsatisfying. The corporate world understands something about human psychology that men in relationships ignore. Respect isn't earned through accommodation, it's earned through consistent demonstration of value and competence. The leader who changes policy every time someone complains doesn't create loyalty, he creates chaos and contempt. The pharmaceutical industry provides another useful analogy. When testing new medications, scientists subject them to increasingly harsh conditions to determine their effectiveness and safety. A drug that breaks down under pressure isn't suitable for treating serious conditions that require reliable performance under stress. Women conduct similar stress tests on male psychology through manipulation tactics. They create emotional pressure, social complications, and relationship drama to evaluate whether your psychological framework holds under adverse conditions. A man whose authority crumbles during these tests isn't suitable for the serious business of leading a family through life's inevitable challenges. The military understands this principle in their training programs. They don't make basic training easier when recruits struggle. They make it harder. The point isn't to avoid stress, but to develop people who can function effectively under stress. A soldier who breaks down during training wouldn't be trusted in actual combat situations. Women apply similar logic to relationship dynamics. They don't want men who need perfect conditions to function as leaders. They want men who become better leaders when conditions become more challenging. This is why your response to her most unreasonable demands often matters more than your response to her most reasonable requests. The counterintuitive truth about manipulation tactics is that successfully resisting them makes them less frequent over time. When you consistently demonstrate that your psychological framework is non-negotiable, she stops testing it as frequently because the results have become predictable. But when you occasionally cave to manipulation pressure, you reset the testing cycle because she's no longer certain about your boundaries. This creates the exhausting pattern that destroys many relationships: intermittent reinforcement of her testing behavior through inconsistent responses. Sometimes you hold your ground, sometimes you don't. This inconsistency makes her testing more frequent and more intense because she never knows which version of you she's dealing with. The psychological principle at work here is the same one that makes gambling addictive. When rewards come unpredictably, the behavior seeking those rewards becomes compulsive. Consistency in resisting manipulation isn't just about winning individual battles, it's about ending the war entirely. The woman who knows with absolute certainty that manipulation won't work stops wasting energy on these tactics and redirects that energy towards supporting your leadership instead. The long-term psychological consequences of succumbing to manipulation tactics extend far beyond individual relationships. Men who consistently fail these tests often develop what could be called accommodation addiction, a compulsive need to modify their behavior to avoid conflict, even when that conflict would be healthy and necessary. This accommodation addiction spreads to every area of life. The man who can't maintain boundaries with his girlfriend often struggles to maintain boundaries with employers, friends, family members, and business associates. The psychological weakness that makes him vulnerable to female manipulation makes him vulnerable to manipulation from all sources. Conversely, the psychological strength required to resist unconscious female manipulation serves you in every context that requires leadership, independence, and authentic self-expression. When you become immune to emotional pressure from women, you become immune to emotional pressure from everyone. The escalation pattern that occurs when manipulation tactics fail reveals the unconscious nature of these strategies. When subtle withdrawal doesn't work, she might disappear for days or weeks. When gentle guilt trips fail, she might create dramatic emotional scenes. When intermittent reinforcement loses effectiveness, she might swing between extreme affection and complete rejection. This escalation isn't conscious strategy. It's biological programming trying to regain control through increased intensity. Her unconscious mind interprets your immunity as a malfunction in her influence system that requires more powerful intervention to correct. The woman who escalates manipulation tactics in response to your boundaries is essentially experiencing a biological emergency. Her programming has detected that its primary control mechanisms aren't functioning, triggering panic responses designed to restore the previous power dynamic through any means necessary. Understanding this escalation dynamic prevents you from taking it personally or interpreting it as evidence of conscious malice. She's not choosing to become more manipulative. She's experiencing biological panic that manifests as increased manipulation intensity. The difference between women who escalate versus those who adapt reveals fundamental differences in psychological health and relationship potential. Healthy women possess enough conscious awareness to override their unconscious programming when it conflicts with relationship goals. Unhealthy women remain enslaved to biological imperatives regardless of the consequences. The ultimate irony of unconscious female manipulation is that it often destroys the very relationships it's designed to protect and optimize. Women who rely heavily on these tactics frequently find themselves with men who either become psychologically damaged or emotionally detached over time. The manipulation tactics that initially secure male investment eventually erode the genuine connection and respect that make relationships fulfilling for both parties. You can't build authentic intimacy on a foundation of unconscious control and psychological manipulation, even when that manipulation isn't consciously intended. This creates the tragic cycle that destroys most modern relationships. Women use unconscious tactics to secure men who gradually lose respect for women who need tactics to control them. Meanwhile, men who succumb to these tactics gradually lose respect for themselves, creating relationships where neither party can maintain genuine attraction or connection. The ultimate paradox is that the less these tactics work on you, the better your relationships become. When you're no longer vulnerable to manipulation, you attract women who don't need manipulation to feel secure. When you stop being controllable, you become genuinely attractive to women who want partnership rather than power. The choice is always yours. Remain vulnerable to unconscious manipulation tactics, or develop the psychological strength that makes manipulation impossible. Either way, the tactics will continue operating. The only question is whether they'll work on you. Choose wisely. Your psychological freedom and relationship happiness depend on understanding this invisible war and developing the immunity that allows authentic love to emerge.